All right. I did receive a couple of emails that I actually want to get to. This had to do with something I said on yesterday's show, and I thought this was interesting that I received several emails about this one particular topic, and I was surprised to receive emails on this one particular topic from last night's show. By the way, I'm glad we're even here after last night's show. Some of you guys, I swear, were trying to get me booted with your comments in the super chats, and I should have pre-read them before I read them out loud. But we're still here. So, but one thing that I mentioned yesterday, fleeting, I made a fleeting comment on this, and I received several emails about it, was about land ownership. So the fleeting comment I made, I believe, was something in regards to, I studied philosophy in college. That's what my degree is in. And I have the concept, and I was saying, I know this is getting like really philosophical, but the concept of land ownership is so bizarre. At what point did a human being kind of say, okay, I'm going to make this land belongs to me. Like, here I was born, I come out of my mother's womb, and I get older, and I actually like draw a line in the ground and say, this is mine. And then, even on a larger scale, you have countries that actually like draw arbitrary borders and say, this is our land and you can't cross that border that we put up. You're not allowed, even though you were born to Earth, just like I was born to Earth, and Earth is going to exist well after you and I don't. And way beyond even after humans are extinct, Earth is going to continue on. But for some reason, we have this idea in our minds that we can own land, that countries can take over land, that groups or tribes or anybody could actually claim land. It's just a fleeting thought. And I was surprised that I ended up getting so many emails about this, but I want to read two of them to you. This one came in from Brent. He said, the remark you made about land ownership, I don't understand how any man can rightly claim ownership of the fruits of any land that will long outlast us all. No great spirit ever gave any land to any people. And to quote Bob Marley, the history of mankind is a history of migration. To be sanctioning land ownership is the real beginning of the division of people into us and them. To continue with the classic Pink Floyd lyric, with and without you, can't deny that's what the fighting's all about. With and without, you can't deny that's what the fighting's all about. It's so rare to find someone who seems to get this, however basic it seems to me. My question to you is, what is that makes us so different? Is it our philosophy of all things? Maybe it's our philosophy background, just the way when you study philosophy, because he says he studied philosophy as well in college, maybe it does make you think about these things like, where did that concept and idea come from that I carve out this land and it's mine? And we're going to get a little bit deeper into land ownership because I don't think you actually ever own land. And I actually, I have a real beef with taxation, with property tax, and we'll get into that. He says, so anyway, he goes into that. And he kind of talks about something else. Here's another one. This was from Rodney. He says, I totally agree, let's see, about the temperament of this country. Okay, so he goes on. So here we go. Your outlook on property ownership hit a chord with me. I thought that I was the only one who felt that borders and boundaries were contradictory to human rights. I'm not sure how a world would function without boundaries, but I have to feel that it might create a better system. If you stay on your questioning of land and boundaries, I found myself coming down to the conclusion that none of us ever really actually own land. Maybe other things also, but land itself. If you own the land, why do you have to pay taxes on it? It does not matter if the land has been in your family for many generations or just recently. Just stop paying the taxes and see how fast the authorities are there to take it away from you. There are many stories in Texas about land being taken from people because they found that 2 or 3 generations ago, Uncle Joe missed out on a couple of tax payments. The oil companies are famous for that. I live in Texas. If you think about it, the land never ever belongs to you. You're actually renting it from the government. The so-called property tax is actually rent, and the title is your lease agreement. I expect that is why the Supreme Court upheld the law that allows municipalities to take land away from you if they have a better use for it or the basis of eminent domain. So I want to kind of go on that a little bit more. So, the concept itself of land ownership to me is just this bizarre concept that somebody woke up one day and drew lines in the sand and said, this is mine and you can't cross this area. That is very bizarre to me and very strange. Nonetheless, I don't know exactly how society would work any differently, right? So we're kind of ingrained in this system now where we have this idea of property ownership. We have this idea of buying land. We have this idea of buying a house. We have this idea of countries and borders. We have the idea that you can't cross these borders without permission from the powers that be, some random person who like deputized themselves, essentially, put a badge on their body and said, I now have authority over you, even though they're just as human as you or me, right? They're just like us. But for some reason, they gave themselves a fancy office and a badge, and they call themselves some sort of a authority, you know, a king or a queen or an emperor or a dictator or just the president or just the government or police or whoever it is, right? And they then say, okay, I now have authority, and the authority in me as a human says that you as another human are not allowed to cross this line, that this line is my country or my nation or my tribe's line. And if you cross it, there's going to be a war. So I understand that that kind of goes back to like tribal, you know, human nature at its basis has been once humans did start to create civilizations, there was this kind of notion that once I build and create something on this land area, that if others come in from the outside, they're not welcome, and I'm going to have to fight them to keep them away from what I built. So I understand the natural human inclination towards that. So I'm not like saying, oh, we have to get rid of land, we have to get rid of borders, we have to get rid of this, you know, land ownership or borders or anything like that. I just think from the concept of it is really interesting and odd. But I do have an issue with borders and immigration. Even though, again, you know, this is all philosophical. In practice, we have to have borders. In practice, we have these immigration laws. In practice, I don't know if there's any way to get rid of it. But in theory, philosophically, there is something very odd about this concept that I cannot cross this line and live where I want to live as a contributing member of society because I didn't get the right permission from the right person who gave themselves a badge and they're sitting in a fancy office in some place, right? Or they're wearing a crown in some place. That suddenly I'm not allowed to cross this border and live, even though I'm a peaceful person, not wanting to make any trouble, not wanting to commit any crime. I'm just wanting to contribute to that community. That to me is very odd. I feel like humans have a natural inclination towards migration, and it is a human right in my mind. And maybe, I don't know, hundreds of years from now, maybe the world will operate like this, where there are no boundaries anymore. There are no more borders. And maybe we would be operating like one big global. I know this scares a lot of people. And they say, oh, we can't have a big global government. We can't become one world, one people. Have you guys been watching Falcon and the Winter Soldier? So, you know, one world, one people. We can't do that, Kim. We can't be one world, one people. Because, you know, there'd be too much control or too much power in the hands of a few. And maybe that would be the case. But philosophically, I still think that fundamentally we should be one world, one people, and that we should be able to move around as we please. The problem with that, obviously, we run into is there are bad groups of people that want to rule in a certain way. So like, I don't want to live under the rule of the Taliban, for example. You know, there's plenty of people who apparently do want to live like that. I'm not one of them. I don't want to live under their rule. So I wouldn't want to live in a world where, you know, they're allowed to like march into my neighborhood and then suddenly I have to live the way they want me to live, or else, you know, convert or die. I'm not really into that. So that's kind of the barrier to that, I suppose. But if we were to evolve and become more enlightened as a people, I do see a future where we would be one world, one people. And there wouldn't be this arbitrary border that you're not allowed to cross and go live in. In fact, we as humans would have the right to migrate wherever we want to migrate. So if I'm living somewhere, for example, and there's too many fires, or there's too much drought, or there's, you know, something else is going on with the weather, I'm allowed to then migrate. So that to me is a natural human right that should exist, because it's natural human nature to migrate. Humans have always migrated when resources were diminished, and they would go to a place where there were more resources. So I'm not sure, why the concept of borders, especially country borders, are like kind of fairly new. When you look at previous maps of the globe, there was a lot of unclaimed territory. And so there was still this concept that you could go and kind of make a life for yourself in an unclaimed piece of land, in an unclaimed territory. But now when you look at the map of the world, it seems like unless there's some island you happen to discover on your pirate ship as you go around sailing around the globe, it seems like every piece of land, and now with satellites, every piece of land has been discovered and claimed. And so there is no more ability for you as a human to do what humans have been doing for a really long time, only up until like a couple hundred years ago, if that. I think there was unclaimed land up until, probably maybe 200 years ago or maybe even less than that was the last time it was, and then all the land was finally claimed. I think once we did get satellites and technology, there absolutely was a claiming of pretty much every single piece of habitable land in the world. I guess you could still go to Antarctica. And maybe with global warming, Antarctica will turn into a tropical paradise, and that is where people will migrate. But that's the thing. You have to have the ability to migrate because humans need to have that ability to migrate. So I know that was just kind of a random thought, and that wasn't really about anything news-wise, but it did have me thinking because I did receive these emails. I did mention that, and I was watching Falcon and Winter Soldier, Marvel's show. If you haven't seen it, it's really good. It was really good. And I have comments and thoughts about that show, the last episode, but I'm not going to talk about it because, I don't want to be a spoiler. But yeah, one world, one people, it kind of had me thinking as I was watching that as well. And that has always kind of been my personal philosophy, is that we should be able to, I should be able to live wherever I want to live as a human. If I'm going to be a contributing, non-violent, non-criminal, right? It seems like I should be allowed to just up and live in Italy if I wanted to, or up and live in Canada if I felt like it, or wherever, but I'm not allowed. Governments say, no, you can't. You have to migrate. You have to immigrate. You have to go through the rules. You have to wait in line, wait your turn, all this stuff. And I don't know. But, on the other hand, there's another side of me that says, oh, it'd be so terrible, because I look at what's gone on even just in my hometown of Boise, Idaho, where, all of these people are flooding into Boise. It's one of the fastest growing cities in the country. And it's so different from when I grew up there. And I was born and raised in Boise. From the moment I was born in St. Luke's Hospital in Boise, Idaho, and I graduated high school in Boise, Idaho, I did the whole thing. And now, it's people that are born and raised in Boise are being shoved out of Boise because so many people are coming in from the outside and they're buying up the property, and it's leaving people that have been born and raised there unable to afford it. And their jobs, of course, are not paying enough. These people are coming in with gobs of money because they've sold their houses in hotter markets, and then they come to Boise and then they buy up the property. So I understand unrestricted, here in the United States, obviously we have unrestricted borders amongst the states. So people in a state like California can sell their house for $1 million, which is a ton of money in Boise, but it's a basic middle income house in California. And you take that $1 million to Boise and you could buy yourself a really fancy house. So it drives up the price, and then maybe if you're poorer in California, you go to Boise and you're living middle class. You've upgraded your income or your class, your economic class. So people are doing this, and that unrestricted border, that ability to do that, has made it difficult for the natives to compete, in the housing market in particular, because they don't have that big, huge chunk of money to put down towards a house. So even if all things else are being equal in Boise, the people that are moving in are also getting jobs in Boise that are paying Boise wages. The difference is those people are coming in with like $500,000 put down on a house because that's what they made off of their house in California. And that makes it to where the people from Boise, Boiseans, are unable to actually compete against others. So I understand also from a philosophical point of view, a practical point of view of what happens when there are open, unrestricted borders. The poor end up suffering quite a bit. The poorest of the poor can potentially suffer. Or, I don't know. Then there's the flip side. It also brings in money. They sell their homes. They too make a bunch of money because of the increase, and they're able to move to a smaller town. And, it just kind of creates this cycle. I don't know. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say about that. All right.